a seat, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين الحضور الكريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. My name is Sid Ahmed Ben Rawan. I am Professor of Management at Carson School of Management, University of Minnesota in the US, and I am advising Dubai Police on some of the exponential technology. I've been here for a few months, but I have been traveling around the world for some time. I think it's safe to say that, as Tariq has mentioned nicely, that artificial intelligence is going to be the new normal in the future. And we wanted to start this conversation by looking at one of the most important elements in introducing artificial intelligence in the work of society and the work of government. And that is the predictive analytics capacity of artificial intelligence that will allow you, again, to create an environment in which safety is important, crime is controlled, and more importantly, being able to create an environment for your community that is safe and free of all crime. So I want to start this discussion perhaps with my colleagues here. We have Dr. Isa from Dubai Police, and we have Ryan from Canada. I'll give you probably the mic to Ivan, if you could just introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Ivan Christoph. I'm the first guy who did the work on the tallest building in the world, CN Tower, before Burj Khalifa. And one of the interesting things is that as a student at the University of Toronto, even at the beginning of this century, we were talking about trailblazing. For example, the Department of Canadian Defense was asking the University of Waterloo how for their soldiers they can train with trailblazing. They first videotape the situation, and then they give them different scenarios. And one of the challenges here in Dubai, in this place, would be Highrise, aerial Highrise rescue, which we've discussed with Brigadier Al-Matrushi when he used to be Dubai Police Rescue Department, is that, as you know, on high-rise buildings, like super high-rise buildings, and especially now with the mega high-rise buildings, the perception for the pilot at 800 to 1K is completely different, because 100 to 200 meters, you can see the trees, you can see the wind. Up there, I've been there, like on top of the mast, it's so small. So that's where artificial intelligence comes in place, because there's so much data, especially if we use 3D imagery to predict what can happen. Also, we have the GPS positioning, and plus there's another element, besides the humanity, the ethics is the divine element we have to take care of. And that's why last year I was on board of a helicopter at 1K just to videotape these things. I would be interested to meet all the people here and open for discussions to see what's the new challenge for A.I.R, artificial intelligence for rescue. Thanks.
Very good, thank you so much. Ivan, I want to go back to you with respect to some of the applications that you see in your own environment, in your company. You come from private sector and you have tested a few solutions. What is the most important solution or application you want to think about?
Well, I would clarify that I'm going back to the volunteer, because being a professional, doing the high-risk extreme work, especially what someone has not done, especially in areas where no one has gone before me, being the first guy, I did the job. One thing you have to know is the high risk is the liability. It got consequence, because when I had to be the first guy who to work above 500 meters, they said, Ivan, by the way, if you drop just one piece of your equipment, they're going to sue for $2 million. Why? Because even if you just drop it in front of somebody, it says, oh, I'm scared of heights, and they will sue us. So that's why I like these terms, smart police, intelligent innovation. That's one of my concepts for smart rescue. But when it comes to a legal issue, for example, if they would ask me, why did you make this decision? I couldn't say, oh, I did this, my artificial intelligence personal assistant told me that. No, that's why it's better to meet with the powers that be, to see what they've been. They've been the pillars, they have case studies, and from there to develop new, because when I say new, it's my decision is to do the new kind of, the rescue of the future, the new kinds of rescue. And it's rescue one. One guy can go there because you minimize the risk. For example, the first implementation that I did in Toronto was 2 men, 1 pilot and me. we could replace what the Canadian Air Forces could not do and they were not supposed to do, because in urban environment, they're not supposed to enter unless there is war. That's why they avoid the high-rise buildings, and there's too much danger because we had accidents when 6 people die, it's too large, so I simplified these things. And the other thing is that there's so much information, for example, because you have a new challenge, you have high-altitude suicides. I mean, high altitude on high-rise buildings, on high mountains, they prefer, you know, I want to die like a king, I want to see the whole world in front of me, 8,000 meters above, or on a very iconic building. So that's a new challenge that should be addressed, very, very careful. And again, even though my father was a diplomat and he was in the police force, I would expect the experts to say their opinion, because I'll give you an example. In Toronto, there was a high-rise buildings, and on the side of the building, the swing stage was flying. So the fire department goes, it's just across North York, and the fireman says, you know what, I'm not going to let 4 of my guys enter into your premises until it's completely safe. Whoever got these people there, let him get them secure, and then, only then, I will go there. So that's why you have to look not just the history in the future, but what's the legal ethics. And because ethics is a very, you know, it's a gray area, then you go by case studies and to see the wisdom of the humanity.
I want to go back to you, Ivan. If you look at your own company, how did your customers dealt with the technology that you have implemented? What was the things that you have done to make it acceptable to them?
Well, I wasn't concerned about that. I came with innovation. I said, let me handle the things, for example, and I think that was the right way, because I was the very first to use the we didn't have smartphones then, digital cameras to videotape everything, because I give you a case study. What happens is that they hire a company, they do the job, they don't fix it. They hire a second company, do the job, they didn't finish the job, the third. And how I made reputation, I just went there with the cameras, with the equipment, finished job, said, here's your problem, say, oh my God, we should have hired you in the very first thing. So you don't wait for them. I just go with innovation. But when it comes to AI for law enforcement, I come into a different world. That's why, speaking of innovation leadership, you know, being at the forefront, there's one missing part that hasn't been discussed so far, and that's the religion. Because right now here we have different religions, so there's different meaning of pro-life, pro-choice. You know, in North America, in both sides think they believe they're right, pro-life or pro-choice. So in rescue, you have to deal with new ethics. We don't want to play gods. You know, in the medical world, there is this syndrome. So that's why not just artificial intelligence, new technology, you can have live actions and make the decision makers, the people who will live with the consequences, what they'll decide. Because if you get to the person that he wants to be, but he doesn't want to be rescued, he wants to end his misery, something like that. How do we do that? You know, we don't want to get the human factor out of the equation. That's where we don't want to get into divine factors. So that's why leadership is how you put it, but you have discussions like here, and at the end of the day, you made the report and you present it, and then that's this part. Then you have to fight to have a proof of concept and why this and why that.
Very good, thank you. I think we have a few minutes left in this panel discussion, and I wanted to end this discussion with this issue that we have been talking about, which is the ethical aspect of decision making, or what we call decision making in AI. I wanted to show you this picture, which comes from a very known philosophical problem that we teach in business schools and in other schools as well, and it's called the trolley problem. The trolley problem is an exercise, and it's an intellectual exercise that you present to your students or to your audience to force them, to challenge them basically to make decisions that probably they don't like or they don't want to make. And in this trolley problem, you have 2 scenarios. You have one scenario in which you have a train that is going either to kill 1 person or 5 people. And your choice is basically to change the lever so the train goes either to kill 1 person or to kill 5 people. You don't have choices. It's either 1 or 5. So that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is basically you have someone in the bridge that you can push, And when you push that, someone will stop the train, and that train will save the 5 people. When I run this experiment with my students, most of my students would find no difficulties in using the first scenario, which is simply changing the lever. Say, well, you know what? I have to save 5 people, so I'm going to kill 1 person. But when you ask them actually, what about scenario B, where you be pushing the person, basically you are actually you making that decision, then most of people will be reluctant. Why? Because in the first scenario, you're using technology. The lever is a metaphor for technology. So it's not you who's killing, but it's basically the machine. In the second one, it's you pushing the person, and most of people would find it very, very difficult to make that choice. MIT ran a study just very recently, about 2 months ago, basically taking this scenario of the trolley problem and then asking the question, will a driving machine or driving car make a decision about who to kill? If you have 2 people on the road, is it a grandma or a young kid? Is it an Emirati or an American? Is it a white or a black? Is it an Asian or European? How do you make those decisions when you have this idea of AI? So I want to go back to my panelists. Ryan, I want to start with you with respect to this moral decision. What are some of the issues that you are dealing with in your own implementation of AI that deals with this ethical dilemma?
2 things come to mind. The first one is, before you adopt AI, you really have to ask the question, should you be adopting AI in the first place? Is there an intrinsic value that is morally based in your decision to adopt AI? So do you get, and I kind of distill it down to something really as simple as, do you get the creepy factor? Are you doing something that, when you look at it, makes you feel uneasy and makes you, that's a bit creepy, and I wouldn't want machine learning to be able to do that, and I'm not sure, if I don't feel at ease with that, the general public would definitely not feel at ease to it. That's one component, but kind of delving deeper into it, the issue I'm finding with big data in itself and our capacity to now data mine that and run through, you know, very advanced algorithms that do pattern analysis is there's 2 issues. One is the ethics of the machine learning itself. Does it have any capacity to identify bias within the data? Is the data in any way, especially, and this is specific to law enforcement, is there racially or prejudicially based decision-making on the data collection that is now being ingested by the machine learning? And by doing that, it becomes a self-fulfilling, replicating bias, and potentially racial or socioeconomic decisions are being reinforced by the machine learning. So for example, one of the arguments, Los Angeles Police experimented with crime forecasting, and they now have the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, which is a very powerful grassroots civil-based resistance to the use of machine learning. And their perceptions of the use of AI and is that the police officers are over-policing certain marginalized communities. And by doing that, they're doing more data collection. If there's a white community or a Hispanic community, they're making decisions before the implementation of AI to go predominantly in the Hispanic or black communities. And because of that, they're collecting more data on those communities. And because of that, that's now being fed into the machine learning. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that the machine learning now reinforces that data bias, and we now tells the officers, you should be going to this community. And the perception is from a law enforcement, they say, well, it's machine learning, it's scientific, it's ethically neutral, so it's perfectly fine. There's no prejudice or racism in the decision making. It's scientific, it must be valid. But it loses sight of there's always a human element to the creation of the data. It's based on our interactions, our decision making. And I think that gets lost in many respects.
Thank you so much. That's actually an important element. So a good AI is good only as far as the data that you are inputting into that AI. The algorithm by itself doesn't do anything. The algorithm simply plays with what you give it in terms of data. So you provide bad data, you get bad results. You provide good data, you get good results. And that's, it seems to me, what's missing in this conversation about AI. As if we're thinking about AI in terms of magical terms, forgetting that AI, it's simply about statistics. It's simply about probabilities. What is my probability that in this region a building will collapse? What is my probability that in this area an event will happen? And those probabilities are primarily based on the data that I have. We used to tell and to teach our students the following formula. That was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Previous performance is your best indicator of future performance. If you are trying to hire someone and you don't know that someone, so what you're going to do, you're going to simply look at their previous performance, and that would give you a good indicator of their future performance. That's exactly what we are doing with data. So you give me previous historical data, and then I will tell you what will happen in the future. But if you give me bad data, most likely I am going to give you bad results. The problem is that the person who's behind those choices will tell you, you know what, oh no, that's an AI decision. That's a machine learning decision, as if machine learning makes decision by itself, and that's, I think, the wrong idea. So I'll go back to Dr. Isa. What are some of the things that you are doing at Dubai Police to make sure that those moral questions, those ethical questions are being asked before rolling out a new technology?
In Dubai Police and in Dubai government, we were ahead, I think, in the ethical implications of AI. The Dubai Data Initiative published a set of rules or ethical on how to implement ethically AI in different organizations. It is now as a guideline for government agencies to go through this questionnaire, let's say, or survey, to measure how ethical their AI applications are. And the next step is to have a law, because we are at the end a law enforcement agency. So whatever there, if you think in law enforcement we use AI, what about private companies? What about other players in the market? They should follow the same rule. It's government, private sector, everyone is involved, and they should take ethical consideration when they roll out AI applications. So the ethical AI law should be released and approved. And I think the Elon Musk and others asked for a global AI law, where to apply and where not to apply, applying AI in wars, in civil areas, etc. So we are lacking that legal framework, so everyone would know where he stands or she stands, on which side of the law at the end.
Very good. I think that's also one of the serious challenges that we face as a community. I had a chance and the honor to be at the World Government Summit about a month ago, a few weeks ago, and we had this discussion with respect to ethical AI, and there is an international group actually led by the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence in the UAE that is actually thinking critically about the ethical and the moral framework. Of course, legislation is very important. The legal framework is very, very important. But beyond the legal and beyond the legislative environment, you still have to train people on how you can make those choices and those tough choices. Ivan, what's your experience with respect to this moral decisions when it comes to implementing your own technology?
Well, besides reading the Bible, because I'm Bulgarian Canadian, that's one of religion, I like this A and B dilemma, because if you switch the question, who would rather save? It's much easier, the baby. Now, this dilemma in the medical aspect, as a father of 2 kids, has been, okay, if the woman has a birth and the doctor must make a decision, either the mother or the children. In our religion, it's the mother. But there's another religion, another country, because that's where, not just what kind of data you put, is, oh no, the mother has already lived her life. The priority is, #1 is the new life, the baby. So that's, especially in the Bible, it starts with, it first was the word. So that's why it's easier for the location. But then comes the ethical, what you have to do with multicultural countries, what you have to do with another situation, and that again comes to the legal aspect that follows them, and you rely on the law.
Very good. I'm glad that you mentioned the religious reference because, again, as a community, as a human race, a lot of our values come from that first upbringing with respect to religion, whether it's Christianity or Islam. Do you have any answer to some of these questions?
Yes. Just add, what you're talking about is transformation of liability. Or do I make a decision and go with that, or the manufacturer? In Canada, that's usually, it's the manufacturer, because if he has to be sued, he has the more money. I'll give an example. Drives a car, and one is at fault. The one at fault hits a telephone booth. Who do you think the company, the lawyers will try to sue? The telephone company. Why? Because they have more money.
No, I appreciate that. But
that's in Canada. That's why that's in Canada. That's
very good. So I wanted to thank you so much for being interactive with this panel. I want also to thank all my friends here in the panel and thank you for great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.